Hello and welcome to another instalment of Right from the Kickoff. I mean, 2 in 2 weeks. You can't get any better than that. We're actually on
a
track.
record.
On for the record. Obviously, joining me today, as always, is my football partner in crime, William Bayliss. How you doing, Will?
I'm all good as always. COVID-free finally.
Yeah, well, that's always great. I mean, can't say the same for the Premier League, unfortunately, which we'll go on to. So we'll get straight into it then. Talking points this week. Obviously, Rafa Benitez has been sacked by Everton, but we'll start with the latest round of cancellations for the Premier League. Obviously, Leicester Burnley was cancelled, and the North London derby was cancelled. Now, there's been a lot of sort of different opinions on this one. What did you make of it, Will? And if you wanted to go into any more in depth, you can do.
Well, it was a bit ironic because Arsenal just played 2 games before that, and they seem to have a full strength side. And the amount of the squad depth that Arsenal have is crazy, and to have this amount of cancellations is just ridiculous. Really, it's just getting out of hand now. We know that they have injuries and African combinations, but since when was that a basis of cancelling games? They're just cancelling games because they don't have a full strength squad. They're rather waiting for these important matches, like Liverpool did a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna throw my own club into this, and obviously we've spoke about it off air, haven't we, Will? In terms of, I've actually said that I've not been the happiest with my club when they cancelled the game against Everton. Bear in mind that 48 hours before that, or perhaps just a little bit more, they played a game against Watford. I'm not getting this kind of. I understand that there's certain players that aren't signed up for the Premier League. Like, for example, we can use Mendy in the FA Cup and we can't use him in the Premier League because you've got to have a 25-man squad. I get all of that, but let's just go with this. Arsenal, for example, had one COVID case. The rest were either injuries or they had players out of the AFCON. Bear in mind that Arsenal, I think, have got the most players out with Leicester, with about 4 or 5 players out going to AFCON. Now, Arsenal in the week had sent 2 players that would have been eligible to play in the Premier League out on loan. They've also got 4 players out in the AFCON, and obviously they've got injuries. But you know your player's going to be playing in AFCON if you're going to sign him, so you know that. So that's down to yourself. If you're going to send 2 players out on loan in the previous week, and then claim that you've got too many injuries and you haven't got enough players to fill the squad, to me it just doesn't. It seems very lackluster, and the fact that they're basically just trying to play with the guidelines a bit. Arteta's basically just gone, or Arsenal as a whole have just gone, yeah, it's fine, we'll cancel the North London derby because we haven't got enough players to fill the team. That might be the case, but it's down to you as a team. Do you know what I mean? So that's where I'm uncomfortable with it. You've sent 2 players out on loan that you couldn't really afford to because you had games running up. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really happy with it. I mean, what's your take on it, Will?
You just feel a bit uncomfortable with the whole situation. I'll give a good example of where it works in other leagues around the world. Bayern Munich had a bench full of youth players because of COVID cases, and they still carried on. You know what I mean? Teams in the Premier League are now using it as an excuse not to play, and it makes me feel uncomfortable around it. I know other people like Gary Neville has spoken out about this, and it's starting to get a bit more traction where it's just getting ridiculous and out of hand.
Yeah, I mean,
think about the fans as well. They abandoned the game about 48 hours before it, and fans come from all the way around the world to watch games like this. The North London derby, I know I've been to go and see it before. People book trains, flights in some cases, hotels. Yeah. And London's not a cheap area as well, so it just makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable. And again, the fans pay the brunt of it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I've seen a lot of Arsenal fans on social media, as you'd say, kind of look for the excuses, so to speak, or we've got so many injuries, we've got this, that, and the other. But no other game in Premier League history has been cancelled because of injuries. So it's quite clearly because of the COVID guidelines, and because you've got one COVID case, it does not. And AFCON, everyone knows AFCON's coming up. I do not buy that as an excuse, and it's the same for my team. I don't buy. Yes, we've got 4 players that have gone to the AFCON. I don't buy that as an excuse as to why you can't field your games. I've even said to you at this point, with the amount of Leicester's games cancelled, other than Burnley, they've had the most cancelled so far. I even said to you, I don't even care if we lose at this point. I know we're playing tonight for the first time in what seems like forever against Tottenham. But I've said to you, haven't I, that you just want to see football being played. The whole point, the reason we love the game is not necessarily just to win all the time, but it's just so we can talk about the game afterwards, so we can actually discuss how badly or how well our teams have played. Like, that's the whole point of football. And the fact that my team hasn't played now in the Premier League since before New Year, we're talking 3-4 weeks now. Closer to 3, but it's just got a bit ridiculous. And to field a team in the FA Cup and then have a game cancelled, like I say, 2 days later, doesn't sit right with me as a Leicester fan. And this is what I wanted to say about Arsenal. I'm not having a go at Arsenal. I think teams are taking advantage of this. It just doesn't seem right to me how Leicester can have a squad that's available 2 days before they have another game cancelled.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sit right with me, and that's as a football fan. Forget I'm a Leicester fan. That's just as a football fan as a whole. It doesn't sit right with me with my own team, so it's definitely not going to sit right with me with Arsenal. Before anybody slates me for kind of having a go at Arsenal, I also have an issue with this where my own team is concerned. Right, moving on to football matters. Obviously, Rafa Benitez, latest manager to be sacked to the Premier League. What do you make of this? And are you really surprised, given the toxic environment that Rafa was always going into, being appointed the Everton manager? It just never seemed like a match made in heaven at all, did it? And it seemed like the wrong decision. And Everton as a football club are being run into the ground, basically. It's a complete shambles where they're concerned, isn't it?
It just seems like they have more money than sense, doesn't it? In some ways, in most ways, to be fair. Like Rafa Benitez, like you were saying, as soon as he walked in, people were slating him already before he even started. Like Agent Rafa, for example, blah blah blah, and you heard of like dressing room disputes. Why Digne moved to Aston Villa because he was unhappy after just joining. It's just something needs to change around Everton, because if they're not careful, they are teetering on relegation, aren't they? If they carry on like they're doing, we need to be careful.
When you look at their form, they've won 1 in the last 13, which kind of shows you where they're at. And I think they do kind of worry. Does worry me, because all the other teams around them, and I'm going to include kind of Leicester in this conversation as well, sort of from 10th downwards. All the other teams around them, bar the teams that are below them, are picking up points. You look at Southampton beating Brentford the other day, Leeds obviously winning at the weekend, which we'll go into. Do you know what I mean? Against West Ham, all the other teams are now starting to pick up points.
Yeah,
and you worry that they could also be cut adrift if they don't get it right, because there just seems to be a very toxic environment at Everton. And I wouldn't want to be the manager going into that, to be honest, because this isn't a new thing at Everton. There's been quite a toxic environment for a long time. You think about since David Moyes left, really, he built a great squad, obviously, over a number of years. And then since he's left, there's not really been that consistency. And manager and players, there's been a great player turnover. The money they've spent on players, the type of player they've gone for, really haven't been the type of player Everton needed at that point in time.
Yeah, it just seems like they don't have like a proper strategy in place. They have the money. Their owners are worth billions and billions of pounds, not in the same heights as Newcastle, but they're still in the top 5 richest clubs in the Premier League and in the world at this point.
But it just goes to
they need a good strategy. They do need a good strategy around it, because the whole everything just seems wrong at the club at the moment, doesn't it? They just need to get the whole ethos right. And we've seen the managers being linked with Everton. I want to pass this over to you again, Joe. Who do you think is the right person? We saw Roberto Martinez been
I
linked?
just
Obviously,
think
he's a
I think
Belgian
that's
manager.
enough.
Wayne Rooney or Frank Lampard,
I
all the
think
top three candidates, aren't they?
I think to be honest, we've mentioned again off air that Frank Lampard would be kind of the sort of the choice that I'd go for as an Everton fan. I'd be like, oh, I'll give it a go. Do you know what I mean? He's a young manager. He's had a bit of a hard time at Chelsea where his next job, and Everton seems to be kind of a right fit for him at the moment. But moving aside from that, so Frank Lampard's one thing, right? You look at Wayne Rooney, he's doing a great job at Derby, don't get me wrong. And I'm not going to bash on him because he is doing a good job. And I think he's taken the right job for him at the right time in terms of whatever happens with Derby now, this season, he won't be held accountable for if they get relegated because of where they would be if there wasn't all these points deductions. It's great. I'd say to him, stay at Derby. Don't touch Everton at the moment. There's no point. All you'll do is either ruin your legacy as a player or sort of ruin the kind of good start you've had to your managerial career. Because let's be honest, he's had a good start to his managerial career in difficult circumstances. You have to say that.
Yeah, you have to give good thanks to his assistant as well, who's a highly intelligent man. So if he were to go, the assistant would have to go with him as well because I think they're a good team.
Yeah. It's Liam Rosenior, isn't it? I believe.
Yeah.
That's the guy. Very, like you say, very intelligent and knows his stuff. So yeah, obviously Derby don't want that to happen, but I don't think it will because I think it's the wrong time for Rooney. I might be wrong because obviously,
but in some ways it might be good for Derby if they were to get the compensation. It could help them long term. So it's
but there's a lot of factors to it, and obviously he's a massive Everton fan, as we all know. So that could pull him to the club as well. But if I'm looking at this purely from a managerial point of view, is it the right time for him in his career? I'd say no. But moving on to the other name that's been mentioned, which I have to finish off with this, and I'm sure you agree, Will. Martinez getting mentioned is just laughable and is a slap in the face of the Everton fans, in my opinion. I don't know whether you agree. They had
big word. Why is this, Jay?
Well, because they had when Martinez before he left, they were calling for his name with boards. Martinez out, very much kind of similar to what we've seen over the last couple of weeks with Rafa Benitez. Perhaps not to the same fiery extent with the connection with Liverpool, but still, they called for his head. Obviously, he's gone, and the fact that they think that this man is going to be the solution to take them forward is utterly farcical, in my opinion. I honestly
not. You're saying he hasn't done a good job with Belgium, which you could argue he actually hasn't. But do you think he could have improved as a manager from managing the top level players at Belgium?
No. I'm sorry, just no. It's a step back. You don't. Regarding the circumstances, I mean, you could argue that Nigel Pearson did the same at Leicester, came back to Leicester, but that was because of a massive fallout rather than because of a bad run of results with the owners, and then they made the Kister made up and whatnot. But I just feel like this is a bad move, and Everton fans won't forget this. If Martinez gets the job, I will tell you this now. Everton will end up going down in a downward spiral. And what I mean by that is I don't even mean that he won't have the instant impact. He could have the instant impact and they could finish like 8th. To which way, Everton fans will say, oh, what a great finish to the season. But I'm telling you, in the long term, Martinez is not the answer. And this is what we're talking about with Everton now. We're looking at managers that need to come in for the long term. We're not talking about a quick fix. We're not talking about a Sam Allardyce like they have already done anyway. You know what I mean? We're not talking about that kind of appointment. We're talking about somebody who's going to come in and do something like a David Moyes legacy, or something that's going to get them pushed back up the table and actually use some football nous rather than kind of a quick fix or a name that you think is going to get you the job done in the short term. Everton need to stop thinking about the short term and start thinking about the longer term game because that's the only way.
Well, they have to think about the short term as well because they don't want to get relegated. If they get relegated...
Of course. But the reason I'm saying it more, they've got to think about the short term and the long term together at this point is because of the state of the club. You can't keep looking for short term answers because it's just going to be a never ending cycle. And that's exactly what I said to you off air, wasn't it? It's just a never-ending cycle with Everton. In order to break that, they need to look for the longer-term solution rather than the short-term solution. You could argue that Man U are in kind of a similar phase of their kind of football club at the moment. Is they're looking for short-term answers at the moment. Obviously, they're going to get a permanent manager in the summer, but a lot of it has been kind of short-term. But obviously, Man U are on a higher level, but it's still a similar problem that these football clubs are having. Stop looking for the short-term answers and start looking for long-term answers. Because if you look at the better clubs that have performed better in the past, okay, discarding probably Chelsea, who seem to make managers being sacked a better thing. But obviously, we look at their money, we look at kind of the fans they bring in, all that. You need to start looking at the longer term. The best two teams in the league at the moment are Liverpool and Man City, and they're
by a distance at this point.
They're thinking about the longer term. You look how long that Pep's now been at Man City. When I say longer term, I don't mean like an Alex Ferguson reign. I mean a manager that's going to come in, be able to set his philosophy, and going to be at the club for at least 5-6 years. That's what I mean. I'm not talking about your Arsene Wenger because that doesn't happen anymore. We know this. Do you know what I mean? But when you're talking about longer term now in football, you're talking about your Klopps, you're talking about your Pep Guardiolas, you're talking about your David Moyes. You know what I mean? The ones that can put an infrastructure in and it can work. So yeah.
No, you're not wrong there, Joe. But what is the answer then?
Well, like I said, I think Frank Lampard's probably the better option for Everton at the moment, because I think he can get his philosophy over, and if he's given time, obviously results and time are they have to coincide together, of course. But I think you really need to try and give a manager a bit of time, and not make sure that they're not the manager that you're going to hire from your rivals, that all his achievements have come with your rivals. I just think that was a stupid appointment with Rafa, let's be honest. You need to get the fans on side and quick.
Yeah, and the next game at the weekend, we're playing Aston Villa, so that's not going to be a hard game to go to, and I can't imagine hiring a manager before then, can you?
No, I think Duncan Ferguson's going to be taking a caretaker manager's charge, which he's done before, and he's done a decent job. But obviously, he's still part of the coaching staff. So arguably, you could say, is he still part of the problem? Is he the man to take Everton forward? No, he's not. But he will take charge. I won't be surprised if they get a result. But again, Villa are on a good stint of form, and obviously Gerrard's done a good job since coming into Villa. So it's going to be very difficult for Everton to get a result.
Yeah. Do you have a score prediction for this game then?
Let's go score prediction. I'll go 2-1 Villa. 2-1
Villa. I've actually gone 2-1 Villa as well. So that's interesting how we both think that. I know it's not going to be easy, but you never know. Let's talk about the other upcoming fixture, which is going to be an interesting then. A bit of a relegation battle in Watford versus Norwich, and Norwich actually just beat. So they would sack their manager, and it was a really good performance from Norwich, and much needed, isn't it? So, what do you think of their chances, Norwich and Watford's
it's difficult.
Relegation battle?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think this one could be a draw. I think the teams around them need it to be a draw. You look at the likes of Newcastle and Burnley. I'm gonna go 1-1. I think both teams have the attacking capabilities to score a goal, although Norwich have only scored 8 goals. But we know they can score. But I think, to be honest, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. But if I was to pick a winner, it would be Watford. I just fancy Watford more so than Norwich. But I'm going to go for a draw, 1-1.
I'm going to have to agree. But I went 2-1 Watford. So we think it could be either one for this one.
Yeah.
What interestingly in that is that it's so hard to look at the table pragmatically, because there's such a wide range of amount of games played, and we've spoken about it because of COVID before, but Burnley are in last place with 11 points, but Norwich 4 games more and you have 2 points more, so you could argue Burnley are doing better than Norwich at the moment.
I still think in football terms, especially when you're fighting down the bottom, those 2 points. I'm not saying Burnley
But
aren't
4 games in hand, Joe.
Yeah, no, I know they've got 4 games in hand, but they've only got 11 points from 17 games. Will they've got 11 points from 17 games? You know, they're down there for a reason. So the likelihood of them actually picking up those 2 points over the next 4 games, you know, I'm not saying Burnley are going to get beat every game, but I just think there's a reason they're down there. What I'm saying is, I think they're on a very even keel, even though Burnley have got 4 games in hand. Because Burnley aren't going to go and beat everyone, are they? Do you know what I mean? You just know they're not.
Yeah, well,
And
let's
also
speak about Burnley then.
They've lost Chris Wood, haven't they, recently?
Yeah, that's going to be a big loss. I've seen the likes of Benteke being linked from it, but I don't think they can afford Benteke. I think it's going to be too much for them.
Yeah, I just feel like with Burnley, I was very, very surprised because obviously Chris Wood had a clause in his contract, didn't he? With the fact that it was 25 million buyout, so that's all that Newcastle had to do. One, you've put that clause in, so at this day and age, 25 million for your main striker is not good. Do you know what I mean? When you're talking about the sums of money that people are paying, and even you've sold your best striker to a relegation rival for 25 million, but then who are you going to get in for that money?
Exactly.
What I mean?
You would have thought if they had agreed to sell it, they should have had contingency plans in place of saying, "Oh yes, we can go in for this player, this player."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly sure whether Burnley can't compete with Newcastle now on a monetary way, can they at all? So obviously the player's going to want to go, so he's not going to want to discuss a new contract with Burnley, and I just think whoever put that in his contract for 25 mil is kicking themselves because, to be honest, I'm not a big fan of buyout clauses in contracts. I'm just not, because then it gives other people the power to go and approach your player, regardless of what it is. And I just feel like 25 mil for Chris Wood to them is far too little, to be honest. Because you think about Chris Wood in terms of Burnley, what his monetary value is to them over the past couple of seasons. He's not been performing this season, so that's probably
he is 30 years old as well. So I think
but I think you've got to look at it in a moment in time. Not only have they sold him for 25 mil, which you'd say that is a astronomical amount of money, but to Burnley as a football club, he obviously did a lot for them. But also, not only that, you've allowed one of your relegation rivals, so one of the people you're trying to catch at this point in time. You've allowed to take one of your best players, and I just don't think it's been very good management from Burnley, if I'm going to be truthfully honest.
So you don't think they're going to survive the season, then, do you? If it
carries on, I think they're gonna struggle, because I've got to be honest. I said this at the start of the season. I thought they would finish in the bottom 3, because I think as a manager, you look at Wigan, for example, as a team like Burnley and a team like Wigan, to just kind of draw the same comparison. They've always got that bounce in them at some point in the season, where they start picking up results and stuff. But eventually it catches up with you, and you can't do that every season.
Yeah, no.
And I think Burnley are just kind of finding that out now. Sean Dyche is a terrific manager. I think he's done a great job with them with the budget he's got. But I think the luck's going to run out. You look at Bournemouth with Eddie Howe. Eventually, the relegation got them, because back again, it's so hard to keep year on year when you fight relegation.
I know you probably didn't mean it like that, and some Burnley fans are probably going to slate you for this, but you just said the luck's probably going to run out. I do think it's completely a luck. Sean Dyche has done a terrific job.
I didn't mean luck particularly. Obviously, Burnley have done very well to do what they've done, and I think there was a season a couple of years ago where they finished near to Europa League, didn't they? I think they did finish in Europa League, so it's definitely not been luck. But what I mean is, I think there's been so many times where their season seems to kick start and they pick up results. And that's not happened yet. and it usually has happened before now.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm slightly concerned for Burnley. It's definitely not been luck. That's not what I meant. I was just trying to use the right terminology.
Yeah, I was just trying to cover your back there, Joe, because I'm sure you didn't mean it like that.
Yeah. No, they've not been lucky to be where they are, but it's just I think what I'm saying is I think time might have run out for them this season.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you're
not
probably
luck.
right there, Joe. So the upcoming game against Arsenal, what score are you going to go for?
I can't see anything else but an Arsenal win. I mean, I know I don't know whether Thomas Partey is going to be included in that because, of course, Ghana got knocked out of the AFCON, so he'll be back for Arsenal at some point. But also the fact that Burnley's game, again, obviously was cancelled at the weekend. They will also cancel the midweek game between them and Watford because of COVID. Now, this is a team for me that has actually genuinely been struggling with COVID and injuries and stuff. Obviously, they've been rife with COVID. They have been for a number of years, but I think it's because also they've got one of the smallest squads in the Premier League, so naturally they're going to struggle. But I think so. It'll be interesting to see if that game's on. But you know that they're obviously the kind of most behind in the games for the teams, and I think it's Leicester and upwards then. But yeah, they've had the most games cancelled, so we'll see what happens. But if the game goes ahead, I can't see anything else. But I'm going to go Arsenal 2-0 win.
2-0. I would have to agree with you. Let's review the games then. So Brentford versus Wolves. Brentford aren't in the best of form. They played really badly against Liverpool, in my opinion. How do you think this is going to go?
Wolves 2-0. I think Wolves are in good form. You know, Wolves are picking up results here and there. They're starting to play their style that they did last season. I think Bruno Laga's come in and kind of implemented the same style. They're slightly more attacking as well than they were under Nuno. I think they're gonna win this one easily. So I'm gonna go 2-0 Wolves.
2-0. So next game, Leeds versus Newcastle. Now I think this is going to be a taster encounter, isn't it? What are you going to go for?
It's going to be difficult because obviously Leeds haven't been the best of form, but they've just come off a great win against West Ham.
Well, they played really well. They deserved.
Yeah, they did.
Deserved that victory.
They did, and that's the thing with Leeds. You just don't know they're so hard to call because they could easily lose this one, but they could also batter Newcastle. I'm gonna go Leeds 2-1. I think Leeds are gonna have enough to beat Newcastle, leaving them in a state of what I would say crisis because they need out of all the clubs this season, they need to stay up. They need to stay up.
Yeah, they really do. I've gone 1-1 in this game. Next game, Manchester United versus West Ham. Again, another tasty encounter.
I've got to say, with a week's rest with West Ham, because obviously they had 3 games on the trot last week. You know, Leeds, Norwich, and then Leeds again in the league. I'm going to go Leeds. No, I'm not going to go Leeds. I'm going to go West Ham. I'm going to go West Ham 1-0.
West Ham 1-0. I've gone 2-0 to West Ham, so we'll wait and see that. West Ham need this win.
Because,
but equally...
I mean, Man U are in poor form, let's be honest.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've gone 2-0 to West Ham. Southampton, Man City. I've gone 4-0 to Man City. I can't really say anything ever in this game. Man City just running away with it now.
Who are they playing? Sorry, Will.
Southampton.
Yeah, I can't see anything else but a Man City win. I'm gonna go 3-0 Man City.
I've gone 4-0, but it could be anything at this point. We've talked about Arsenal, Burnley, Crystal Palace, Liverpool. There's been classic games over the years in this fixture.
I think it's going to be tight, but I still see Liverpool coming out on top. I'm going to go 2-1 Liverpool.
I've gone 3-0 Liverpool. I think it's going to be a whitewash, for being honest. But Crystal Palace have been in good form. Leicester, Brighton. Now, I think it's going to be an interesting game. What are you thinking, Joe?
It's difficult because we've got a lot of injuries. Obviously, a lot of players at the AFCON. A lot of, I mean, when I say we've got a lot of injuries, we've only just got enough to field a squad tonight. So, I mean, I would love you to come back to me tomorrow after tonight's game, depending on whether we pick up any more injuries or not. I'm gonna go 1-1, to be honest.
1-1. I've got 2-2, so anything can happen.
Yeah.
And finally, quite a big game: Chelsea versus Spurs.
Again, it's difficult because Tottenham haven't played the last game, so it's difficult to say on form. It's more difficult when you haven't got form to go off, isn't it?
Other than Chelsea.
Other than Chelsea, I mean, if Chelsea continue playing the way they are, I still see Spurs. Both teams are on a bit of low ebb at the moment in terms of they're not picking up wins constantly, are they? I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go for a 2-2 draw. Let's go for it. Why not?
2-2. I've gone 1-1, so very similar scorelines this week. But yeah, thanks very much for joining me, Joe. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I've just got a quick question to ask you, mate. Obviously, Joe asks and Will tells. I know you're about to shut it all up, but I was just wondering whether you wanted to do that. I was just going to say to you about because I know it's close to your heart. I was going to say to you about loanee players. What do you make of loanee players? Because, for example, we've been talking about this with Nottingham Forest this week. Jed Spence is obviously on loan at Nottingham Forest from Middlesbrough, and of course he's having interest with him from higher clubs. Where do you think this puts Forest? And also, what do you think about loan players in general? Good, bad, ugly? What's your opinion?
I think they're 100% good. Other than if you're loan players, it can be a bit risky at times because you don't own the player. Like in Jed Spence's case, Middlesbrough wanted to get rid of him. Neil Warnock at the time, who was Middlesbrough's manager when we first received him, he said he could either go right to the top or he could go right down to non-league. That was such a wide distribution. But Steve Cooper got the best out of him, and now he's being linked with Arsenal, AC Milan, loads and loads of other players. So in a way, teams can use it as a shop window and improve their players. We see it a lot with like Chelsea, for example. They loan so many players out, like youth players out to all across the world to try and build up experience, and they use it as a shop window in other ways because they know that most of the loan players aren't going to be Chelsea players for much longer. So they use it as a good tool to earn money. They know it's a good money-making tool. So that's why I think that I can't see any harm in it, really. What do you think, Jay?
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more talking about it from a fan's point of view because you can fall in love with a lone player.
Never fall in love with a lone player.
And then and then obviously, and your first thought is, can we sign this dude? But then if you're the person that they're loaning him to, it's often because, especially, I do find it more difficult to, not so much as a Premier League club now, but I remember Leicester, we'd always struggle to hold on to players on loan, that you'd perhaps put in a bid for. But if somebody in the Premiership came in for him, then that was it, basically. So it is more difficult to hold on to loan players in the lower leagues. Not so much in the Premier League, but I understand the frustration because I remember when we had Tom Cleverley at the very start of his career come to us on loan when we were in League One, and he was just at that time a class above anything we had, and you could just tell. I went to a lot of the games. You're looking at this player and you're going, okay, so this is what a future Premier League player looks like. Do you know what I mean? In terms of the disparity between League One and the Premiership. And obviously this kid, he's about sort of 17, 18, and he's just ripping defences apart with his passing, with his shooting, with his overall play, just because he's a class above. And I think it is difficult for your League One and your Championship teams to kind of rotate players and stuff, because I mean, if you lose a player like Jed Spence's quality, it's going to hit you hard because it's an option for the manager to play, because obviously he's a good player, but then you're not going to keep him, so it does make it more difficult.
No, 100%, and it's just we're looking for a draw, really, isn't it? It's like a love-hate thing.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure, and you've just got to. You've just got to. I mean, I remember when I think it was Dele Alli. He was. I mean, again, I remember watching him down in League One at Notts County versus MK Dons because I know he was at MK Dons for a season or two. And I remember looking at him back then and going, "This kid is just." I think he scored, he assisted one, but he was all over the park, and he was just honestly, it was amazing to watch him play. Because obviously, when I was watching him at the time, I was going, "Oh, this kid's really good."
I mean, his scoring screamers from 30 yards.
He's awesome. Like at this level, he's unbelievable. And then you kind of and then obviously a year later gets his transfer to Tottenham, and you're like, yeah, that's what you could see that coming because of how good he was. But you always get your standout players in the lower leagues, and sometimes for you younger players, it's the way to kind of get on with the professional game whilst also kind of keeping your eye on and getting pushed up the ladder, if that makes sense.
No, completely.
So yeah, it is good. I agree with you for sure.
100%. So, but if anyone has anything they want to add on that, or they disagree or agree, please let us know in the comments below because we'll be really interested to hear that, won't we, Jay?
Yeah, we would. Just make sure that you like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And any sort of comments, anything that you want to say us, anything you want to tell us, sorry, then, you're more than welcome to. And we'll try and add that into next week's podcast. So this has been Joe Wright signing off from Right from the Kickoff.